Thank you for listening to Torah Media Atlanta. Won't you consider making a donation to help support this important work? Just go to TorahMediaAtlanta.com and click on the donate link. Thank you very much.
So welcome everybody to 5772. The new year, the new Parsha cycle. So every year when we start a new cycle, we launch a new approach. And last year our approach was the basics of Torah reality. And every week, with inspiration from the Parsha, we learned another nugget in developing, I think, a rather thorough and sophisticated grasp of what it means to have Torah reality, how the Torah looks at life and the world and our purpose and so forth. Actually, it was last year's theme that inspired me for this year's theme. And I'll explain it this way. As we got really into Bamidbar, and we were focusing a lot on the people, not the Torah of God, the mitzvos, but the people that were charged with the mitzvos, and all of the challenges that people have, which is very highlighted very much in the book of Bamidbar. We learned a lot of interesting things, and we made some observations. And the kind of the bottom line to me is that in order for a person, for a Jew, to really connect with the Torah, he has to acquire das Torah. He has to acquire Torah knowledge, or a Torah intellect. And on this regard, I saw a wonderful quote over Rosh Hashanah. I was up in Dunwoody with Rabbi Friedman and Congregation Ariel, and he has a wonderful library. And there's one book which I never saw before. It's like an encyclopedia of Torah sources. And on the jacket, there's a quote from Rav Elchanan Wasserman, who was a student of the Chafetz Chaim, and he was a victim of the Holocaust. Very infamous story of he and his students were hiding, and they were discovered, and they were all murdered. And Rav Elchanan Wasserman leaves a Torah legacy in his writings. And he writes on the Talmud. He also writes on he's got a work called In the Footsteps of the Mashiach, where he speaks about faith. And anyways, there was this quote from Rav Elchanan that said, every Jew has das Torah. Every Jew has Torah wisdom or Torah intellect, but to various percentages of their overall das. Some people have 1% das Torah, and the implication is 99% other kind of intellect or other type of knowledge. Some people have 5%, some people have 10%. When we talk about our Gedolim, we talk about our Torah giants or our Torah, greats. These are people that have worked a lifetime through study to try to develop a lot of das Torah. And they may have, maybe some of them have, 100%. I don't know. But we're not born with it. We're not born with it. We're born with common knowledge. We're not even, actually, when we're babies, we don't have any knowledge. But as we grow up, we grow up with the knowledge from the street, or from whatever our parents feed us, or from whatever we learn in school, or whatever we see on the news, or in common culture. And the journey of Torah study is to acquire more and more Torah knowledge, and it shapes the way we think about everything. And that's kind of what man has to do in order to A, connect with Torah, and B, in order to ultimately affect his actions, his midos, his character, his self-control, it's really all about getting the Das Torah, and then from the top down, having it influence everything that we do. That was, to me, like the bottom line of the Torah Reality course. So, giving that some thought, I came up with the following novel idea. Rather than me coming up with my own thoughts about the Parsha, every week pick a pasuk, pick a verse, prominent verse in the Torah, and try to find some quote, some excerpt from one of our classic Torah literature. It could be the Talmud, it could be the Midrash, or it could be a more contemporary writer. It could be the Rambam, it could be Luzzatto, it could be, it could be Rabbi Twersky, it could be who knows who. But the class would be a text-based class, so that I would prepare a handout. We're always asking for handouts. This time we're going to give handouts. I would prepare a handout, preferably on one side, which would have the name of the Parsha on the top, would have the source, where this is taken from. I would I would cut and paste various passages, and then on the top I would, in handwriting, put the pasuk in Hebrew and in English, and then we would together read the text and discuss it. And that would be the format of our class. And the idea is that by learning these texts, we are encouraging the acquisition of Das Torah, of increasing our library of Torah knowledge and Torah wisdom. What do you think?
You're talking about one verse, one pasuk.
One pasuk, but then a page of
by you or
yours truly. I know. I would have to prepare the sheet. I would have to pick the verse and pick the excerpt, pick the source, and then I would read it with you, and I could read the whole page, and then we could discuss it. I could tell you what I took out of it, and then I could open up the floor. Maybe that's more like the format that we've done, where I do the talking for, let's say, 20, 30 minutes, and then we can open up the floor to discussion. Yes?
Would you consider sending that out when you send out the announcement each week? Send out the pasuk and the outline so we could study it?
Perry's suggesting that I send out the pasuk and the excerpted material
Maybe
earlier on.
a couple of days before.
Yeah.
at least. Yeah.
Okay, that's a nice idea. I would have to be able to do it earlier enough in the week, and I also would have to figure out a way to scan it, because this is not electronic.
Okay, well,
Because not all of the sources are available online, so I had to cut and paste in the old-fashioned way.
then at least the pasuk.
Yeah, for sure the pasuk. Yeah, I could do that. Even if I just say chapter and verse, and you go in and look it up.
That's right.
A minimalist, but let me give that some thought. How much we could do. I did this on Thursday, so I actually did, and we may not get to it. I did 2 sheets because we hadn't had class on bereishis, and today's noach, and the 2 passages were both from Derech Hashem, the way of God, and they kind of affect each other. So I'm not going to try to force it, but let's start with bereishis, see how it goes, and if we want to move to noach, we will. If not, I will just give you a synopsis of what the sheet was. But I think we have to go in order here.
And one thing I encourage is that, like you said, you do the reading and so on, and it would only be at the end that people...
We have the discussion. Okay. Fair enough. Okay, should be coming around there. So, for bereishis, for Parshas bereishis, we selected a famous pasuk in chapter 2, verse 17, concerning the Eitz Hadas, the tree of knowledge. And the pasuk reads, Umeitz Hadas tov vara lo sochal mimenu, ki b'yom achalcha mimenu mos tamus. But of the tree of knowledge of good and bad you must not eat thereof, for on the day you eat of it you shall surely die. And that is the translation of the Art Scroll Stone. Rabbi Moshe Luzzatto, as we've studied for much time, we spent 2 whole years going through various aspects of Mesilas Yesharim, the path of the just, which focuses on character development. He also has the work Derech Hashem, which focuses on Jewish philosophy, and we've also quoted that numerous times. So he tells us a very important principle regarding the centrality of the Eitz Hadas in Torah thought. So I'll read through, and then we can have some discussion. As we have discussed, this is chapter. It's various sections. I meant to write the chapter and the section from the book. It's not the very beginning. It's close to the beginning. As we have discussed, man is the creature created for the purpose of cleaving to God. Only man is placed between perfection and deficiency, with the power to earn perfection. Man must earn this perfection, however, through his own free will and desire. If he were compelled towards perfection, then he would not really be the master of it. Compelled. If he were programmed to be perfect, he would not be the master of it. Rather, he who compelled him would be the one responsible, and God's purpose would not be fulfilled. Because the man didn't cleave to God because it wasn't his choice, it wasn't him. It was therefore necessary that man be given free will and be balanced between good and evil and not be compelled towards either. He has the power of choice and is able to choose either side knowingly and willingly and possess whichever one he wishes. Man was therefore created with both a good urge, Yetzer Hatov, and an evil urge, Yetzer Hara. He has the power to incline himself in whichever direction he desires. Okay? That's paragraph 1 of the particular chapter. Then I skipped over to paragraph 5, just because we have to condense it. Among the things that one must realize is the fact that man has been radically altered. As a result of Adam's sin, a great change took place, transforming both man and his world to a large degree, entailing many things and having numerous effects. When we speak of man and his environment, we must therefore distinguish between his state before the sin and his state afterwards. We know from the narrative that, for example, before they ate, Adam and Eve, they didn't realize that they were naked. After, they did. Immediately their thought was, let's hide. Let's hide from Hashem. We're ashamed. So, this indicates that something changed inside of them. Not just the calories of the apple or whatever fruit, but something was altered. And that is what Rabbi Luzzatto is alluding to. And he expands that. When Adam was first created, he was precisely in the state that we have discussed until now, composed of 2 equal opposites, the body and the soul. His environment contained both good and evil. He was balanced between the two to choose whichever he wished. He was like right in the middle. The appropriate thing for him to have done would have been to choose the good, Had he done so, his soul would have overcome his body, and the spiritual would have dominated the physical. He would have then immediately attained perfection, and it would have remained with him forever. I think that I may have put the next one out of order. Let's skip over to 8. When Adam sinned, however, things were greatly changed. The amount of evil that existed initially was just enough to assure that man would be in a perfect balance, allowing him to gain perfection through his own efforts. When man sinned, though, he caused evil to increase, both in himself and in all creation. As a result, it became much more difficult for him to, go over to the left, my handwriting, to attain the perfection that God intended for him. And now let's go back to that paragraph right before. The effort required to earn perfection was therefore doubled. Man must first bring both himself and the world back to the state in which they existed before the first sin. Only then can he raise himself from that state to his destined level of perfection. There is some material that's skipped here. I mean, that's a little bit of a... can't read the whole book. But, you can certainly look at it on your own. So the main point to bring out here is that, first of all, the way he sets it up, that God staged the world with man in it. The purpose is stated for him to cleave to God by making a choice. Choice means that there must be two choices. He must have the ability and the freedom to choose, and the intended purpose would be for him to choose the good. It seems like initially it was equally balanced. It would have been more or less an easy choice. Whereas, now that he made the choice he did, not only did he make that wrong choice, but that it upset the whole balance. And now it's harder to make subsequent choices. And that now what man has to do, his challenge is doubled in that he first has to kind of try to get himself back to the state where it's even a balanced choice, and then he's got to make the right ones. That is, in a nutshell, the excerpt which I wanted to present to you from Derech Hashem. Any comments? Perry?
So, yeah, I don't know why it's taken me so long, but as you were reading that, I just had a thought.
Mm-hmm.
It says here, and I don't know if we're supposed to look at this as shot or, there's so many ways to look at it. Mm-hmm. But if we look at it just exactly the way it reads, mm-hmm. It seems that it says that man is placed between perfection and deficiency with the power to earn perfection, meaning that he has the choice. He can mm-hmm. go either way. We have discussed many times where when a baby is born, that's not at all the way it is. A baby is more or less selfish. It's only until you're 13 or so you grow up before you're able to make those decisions. So if we are going to say that these two people who were placed there, they're almost like babies. I mean, what experience did they have at all? It's not. It seems like God set them up. It just doesn't seem like it was fair. They're not adults like we are.
Actually, now that your question brings into focus what the sages say is that they were created as adults. Well, I think, what is it, 35? No, I mean, you've heard that before. They weren't made as babies. Well, so what that might mean is that they weren't intellectually babies. Maybe God created them with the experience, or maybe. Again, what does experience mean? There was no world before. But what if we were to surmise that they were created the equivalent of let's say, a 35 or a 40-year-old man or woman.
Okay, that's why I said I don't know if you're supposed to take this as shot or that's just a way that it's understood, but it's really difficult to understand it if you really think that they were just
starting out,
newborns.
Right. Yeah, that's a very good point. But maybe that's that. I mean, thank you. I mean, I think that helps me understand why they had to be created as adults, because perhaps they needed to start off on the balance, and otherwise they wouldn't have.
And who taught them? I guess God taught them, and you would think that God would be the ultimate teacher.
Right.
And if God taught them,
right.
They should have been prepared, it would seem, to make the right decision.
The sages use the expression that Adam was Yitzir Kapav Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which means he is the handiwork of Hashem himself. And to me, that implies he didn't have the baggage, He wasn't created of parents. He was created by God. So he was given the advantage of indeed being able to be balanced, even though that would never happen again. Everyone else would go through the birth route. Besides, how hard could his life has been? He never had in-laws. Anyway,
but he had the
it's a very good
teacher.
Good, yeah, and the teacher. Very, very good observation. Yes, Wendy.
So from the stance of a metaphor, if we could look at Adam as being the intellect, and Chava as being it's the fifth rib. Chava's supposed to be the fifth rib, which is the heart and the left thoracic. So you're talking about when you get into lung issues, you're talking about survival issues, and when you talk about the heart, we equate that with emotions. So when we look at the mind and the heart and how the emotions are tempting the mind to do what it knows better, and it falls prey to that instead of doing what it knows to be the right, righteous thing to do.
So Adam listening to Eve is like the mind being swayed by the emotions. Very good. Very nice. Shkoach. Any other comments? Dina? Maybe we will have time to do noach.
I just, the second paragraph from the bottom, I find depressing. The effort required to earn perfection is therefore double. Man must first bring both himself and the world back to the state in which they existed before the first sin. That means.
Well, you don't need me to make the world seem depressing. Just look at the newspaper. But your comment actually brings to focus maybe another idea, which is so well known, is that on one level, part of our tradition is that we're living in this world to prepare us for the world to come, and yet there seems to be quite prominently some intermediate stage, namely the Messianic age. Well, why do we have to go to the Messianic age? Why can't we just go straight to the Olam Haba, which I'm basing it on sources that I know are two different things? Well, perhaps our job now is to get back to the state, and perhaps the Messianic age will be an opportunity for mankind to experience once again that equal balance, so that we can then go to Olam Haba in the way that it was intended. So that, you can call it depressing, or you could say, that's what we're here for. We are here to live in a world that is out of balance, and yet, using our same, power of will, of free will, we can bring ourselves and the world back to the state before the sin. Maybe that's what we're striving for. It doesn't have to be depressing if you realize that that's the way it's supposed to be.
Am I remembering wrong that after Mashiach comes, then people would not really have the evil inclination anymore?
That may be true, and maybe we could reconcile that and say it's not that they won't have free will, it's just that they won't have that overpowering Yetzer Hara like after the sin. In fact, in other words, this may be a key to understanding the transition between the world as we know it today and the Yemos HaMashiach, where Yemos HaMashiach may again be kind of a reliving of Adam and Eve before the sin. Perhaps. Maybe that would be a key. Okay. Doctor, you've been quiet.
Well, I have a lot of things. Before I even say anything, I know the verse, and my dear father would point out something. He says, God says, on the day you eat from that apple, you will surely die. Well, they didn't.
He didn't die.
They didn't die. And there's a midrash that says, God's day is not a day, but 1,000 years. So it means that Adam is supposed to live 1,000 years. Well, Adam didn't live 1,000 years. What happened, near the end, Adam could see the future, and he saw that King David was going to die at childbirth as well as he was being born. So he said, God, take 70 years off of me and give it to King David.
Wow.
And so Adam lives 930 years.
Right.
Now, whether that's so or not,
that's
what my father tells me.
Right. No, your father tells you right, like it is.
So that's from the verse. They didn't eat from... The other thing is, it wasn't that evil existed or didn't exist, it's just that Adam did not know it. That's what there was evil, and there was good, and there was bad, but he didn't know it. He couldn't tell the difference between good and evil.
Right.
So the knowledge is not so much that now you're evil.
Now you know it.
Now you know
it's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
And of course, in our tradition, I believe that the Yetzer HaTov and the Yetzer Hara are both good things. That you need both. You need both. I happened last week to go see Wicked. You know, it's like the Wizard of Oz from the witch's point of view.
Oh wow!
I've always thought the Wizard of Oz was a Hasidic story anyway, but
it's political, isn't it?
Huh?
Okay, I thought it was political. It was about politics.
There's also that. But,
yeah,
you know,
it could be understood on different levels.
Well, surely, I mean, we all know
Any
who the
good
Wizard is. The Wizard is God.
Yeah.
And we also know what the yellow brick road is. That's life. But this was taken from another thing. But before I got into the show, there are people parading. God hates the wicked. You know, God, signs God hates the wicked. But the whole point is that there is a Yetzer HaTov, the good witch, and the Yetzer Hara, the bad witch. Both of whom are good, and both of whom are not so good. So that goes with our tradition. That the whole idea is to know what's right and what's wrong, to know what's good and what's evil. And do we really want to be back to that primitive state where we don't know anything, or do we want to face the challenge to be able to make that choice, to make that decision? That was an ennobling thing that God gave us, an opportunity to eat.
In all due respect, I think that you are, in so many words, describing what motivated Adam and Eve to eat.
God
is that they said, let us know so that we can make the choices on our own.
Good thought.
And that was the attraction, and that was the danger. Because once you know, you're also not innocent anymore, and you tend to make wrong choices. So God was, as it were, saying to Adam and Eve, there is another level of existence where you can know the good and the evil, but I don't want you to be there. I just want you to listen to me. And you will perfect yourself and the world, and then we can move on. And they said, no, we want to know. That's an interesting thing. But if it's okay, since we do have a few more minutes, and it is Parshas Noach, If we could just attempt, and generally we will not do two, but if we could attempt to try to just tackle this other piece, and then we can have a davar shalem, and we can discuss more afterwards. But I appreciate all of the comments. Okay, did everyone get the noach sheet? The verse is 10:32. Ela mishpachos b'nei noach letoldo begoyehem ume'ela nifredu hagoyim ba'aretz achar hamabul. These are the families of Noach's descendants according to their generations in their nations. And from these the nations were separated on the earth after the flood. If you would ask me what in the world all this means, I wouldn't really know. What does it mean according to their generations in their nations? So, I don't know if it's a perfect fit, but what Rabbi Luzzatto teaches us now is fascinating and may bring more clarity into this pasuk. And you'll see right away that what he writes in here has a lot to do with what we read in our first excerpt. This is section 2, chapter 4 of Derech Hashem. Before Adam sinned, he was on a much higher level than contemporary man, as discussed earlier. In that state, man was on a very lofty level, fit for a high degree of eternal excellence. If he had not sinned, man would have simply been able to elevate and perfect himself step by step. He would have then given birth to future generations while still in that state of excellence. Their number would be accurately determined by God's wisdom, depending on how those enjoying his good should best be perfected. All these future generations would have then shared this good with Adam. If Adam had been in this high level, his descendants would have been born of that same genetic tendency, shall we say. God had also determined and decreed that all these generations would have been born of Adam should exist on various determined levels. Some generations, this is the concept that is kind of, I guess, Kabbalistic. Some generations would thus be primary, while others would be secondary, like roots and branches. Later generations would stem from the earlier ones and share their characteristics, like branches stemming from a tree. The number of trees and branches, however, was determined from the very beginning with the utmost precision. Imagine an orchard, and let's say the orchard has 100 trees, and every tree has 10 branches, and every branch has, peaches or figs, whatever you have. So you can classify every fruit by saying which branch it came from which tree, and therefore the dates or the figs that come from this branch on this tree have more common characteristics and different from the ones from the other trees, even though they're all figs. When Adam sinned, he fell from his original high level and brought upon himself a great degree of darkness and insensitivity, as discussed earlier. Man in general also fell from its original height. Mankind in general, being descendants of Adam who had fallen, also fell from its original height and remained on a degraded level where it was not at all worthy of the eternal high degree of excellence originally destined for it. Man could thus anticipate only a very much lower level. And it was in that state that children were born into the world. They were therefore all born into this degraded state. And there are pesukim, in bereishis and in noach, which indicate these children. Yeah. Nevertheless, even in the time of his downfall, the elevated aspect that existed in man as a result of his true root was not completely extinguished. He had fallen, but he still had some spark inside. Adam was therefore not cast aside completely and could still return to the higher level. This is the meaning of the fact that he was banished from the garden, but he wasn't destroyed. But now he would be functioning under an important disadvantage, since he was actually on a lower plane, which merely had the potential aspect of the higher level, but not actualized. God gave Adam's descendants a free choice at that time to strengthen themselves and strive to elevate themselves from this lower state and regain the higher level. So, how did they do? According to the highest judgment, it turned out that none of them deserved to rise above the degraded level to which Adam and his children had fallen as a result of their sin. Not a single one had risen above it all. Now, this assessment is being made at the end of the 20 generations. We are now after the flood and after noach. And noach has descendants. We're at that point, like at the end of Parshas Noach. There was, however, one exception, and that was Abraham. He had succeeded in elevating himself, and as a result of his deeds, was chosen by God. Abraham was therefore permanently made into a superior, excellent tree, conforming to man's highest level. It was further provided that he would be able to produce branches and father a nation possessing his characteristics. The world was then divided into 70 nations, each with its own particular place in the general scheme. All of them, however, remained on the level of man in his fallen state, while only Israel was in the elevated state. Israel meaning Abraham's descendants. After this, the gate was closed on the era of roots. Things would then be directed and brought upon individuals as branches, each one according to his nature. So, going back to the pasuk, I think that may be what is being stated. These are the families of Noach's descendants according to their generations in their nations. This is it. These are the 70 trees in that orchard. From now on, every future generation would just be a product of the tree in which it came. One of those trees is Abraham's tree, and his branches and fruit would bear his characteristics, whereas the other branches and fruits would bear the characteristics of their mother trees. And that is the stage set for the next parsha being Lech Lecha.
In that parsha, when they give the Toldos, do they mention 70?
Yeah. If you look
I never realized it. He may have mentioned 7.
If you look at the end of Noach, I don't know if the verse says Lech Lecha, but if you count 70, if you count up those names, all of Noach's descendants, there's a chart of it in the Stone Chumash. I think. Page 47, the 70 nations. And it goes all the way up to, from Gomer, who was the son of Japhet, to Yovav, who was the son of Shem. Now, is Abraham's name listed here, or is it an ancestor? Let me see. Shem. Okay. So it does. The answer is yes. There are 70 nations. No, it doesn't seem as though Abraham is one of the 70. So I'm not exactly sure how to reconcile this. I just know that the concept of having 70 trees is consistent, and that Abraham was singled out because of the spiritual background over here, that he was somehow utilizing that spark of the potential of godliness, and the others hadn't. And when God saw that there was one man that was going to strive, as Rabbi Luzzatto said in the first excerpt, he was going to, what was it? He was going to where did the first page go? He was going to strive to bring himself and the world back to the state in which they existed before the sin. When Hashem saw that, hey, I've got someone, he says, I'm going to work with that man. And even Abraham didn't produce only excellent seed because he wasn't perfect himself. He was striving, but he wasn't there. And so he produced a Yishmael.
Wow, it's because of sin that caused him to Yishmael?
It was because, since Adam, there was this sullied, essence, genetic essence. And even Abraham, who was personally striving, he could not eradicate. He couldn't that spiritual blemish that existed in mankind. He couldn't totally eradicate it from his being, and neither could his son Yitzchak.
I didn't mean to imply that Adam had sins. I'm sorry, I didn't mean it like that.
Yeah, no, it's this spiritual genetics that Rabbi Luzzatto is telling us about. Abraham hadn't eradicated it fully. Yitzchak hadn't eradicated it fully. Yaakov was the first who not only strove for excellence, but all of his children possessed this spark. And Hashem said, now, not only do I have in Abraham, not only do I have a good tree, but I've got a whole set. I've got a whole, not just the root of the tree, but I've got the branches and the fruit. They're all healthy. And now I'm going to develop them further and then send them on my mission of giving the Torah, etc. But now, of course, I'm getting ahead of the story. Any other comments on this? This is, by the way, this is like...
Seemed like
Yaakov's
sons had blemishes.
Well, let's sit
right.
well with...
right.
Is it all right to take that posture in nowadays? Because, others might say, well, you Jews might be setting yourself up for being superior or better than everybody else. However, the out on that is, no, because it's also Israel. And even Jesus was a Jew. So maybe not. So
that's a good point. I mean, first of all, what Perry said, even when we say that Yaakov had, the expression of the sages use is that his bed was complete. It's a euphemistic expression, which means that he had good children. Now, does that mean that they were perfect? No. Does it mean that they were ready to bring the world to salvation? Obviously not. And while his children did not engage in idolatry, but we saw that there was a lot of, strife and rivalry, which continues till this day. So, if we were perfect, we would be in the next world already. So, but apparently, there's a certain level, a certain, standard that when Hashem sees, we all fell when Adam fell, and when he saw Abraham, he said, he's got what it takes to make a go at making it better. And that's what he bequeathed to Abraham, to Yitzchak and Yaakov. And so when we say that Yaakov's bed was complete, it means that each one is qualified enough to be taken on the Olympic team, so to speak. That's what it means. So therefore we're not haughty because we're not perfect. Plus it only happened because Hashem gave us all these advantages. He could have said, none of you are good, but Hashem has a plan and he wants to see it happen, and he picked Abraham, and we're more, rather than feeling superior, we feel duty bound and responsible, not haughty, but rather we feel the burden, the fortunate, the blessed burden of having to carry this divine mission. That's the posture that we should take, not that we should lord it over anyone, chas v'shalom, but that we should feel the privileged responsibility to somehow bring about the plan of creation.
all right,
How's that? How's that for politically correct? And I'm not saying you should share any of this with anybody unless they're ready to hear this. But first we have to convince ourselves. That's that's not always so simple.
The other thing is, everybody's got their thing. You might say that the English have their literature and Shakespeare, and the Austrians have their Mozart and Beethoven. But our job is morality and God's Torah.
Right.
So it's not a question of haughtiness. That just happens to be what we do.
Right. That's our job. Right. Good. Very good. Okay.
So most of it's going to be on luzzatto.
No, I wouldn't say that. In fact, I've let my colleagues know that I am desperate for good source material. I want to try to find different sources. I will take suggestions from anyone and everyone. I'll have to make the final decision, but I'm going to be looking. Anything from Talmud. I'd like it to be something that's basic. It may be deep, but basic, fundamental, not tangential or esoteric. I'd like it to be something, that helps us develop a consistent approach to Das Torah. That's really our goal here.
I find it interesting that you said first you're going to select the verse.
Not necessarily. No. That's right. I'll present it that way, but it will be the other way around in most cases. Unless I have a verse I just want to talk about, and then I'll look for the source.
Okay.
Did you have anything you wanted to finish with?
Well, I don't know. This may be common knowledge. I've learned this from class. That the Noach's 3 sons were supposed to be, Shem was supposed to be Egypt. And,
Ham.
Oh, I thought it was okay.
Mitzrayim is actually the name of a son of Ham. The actual Mitzrayim was actually a person.
Okay, all right, and then Yafis is Greece.
Yavan, that's right.
Okay, and then
Bavel.
And then Rome apparently is Shem.
Yes.
And I got Shem because I took that from I am the Lord your God who took you out. That's right. So that's how I figured it. Apparently, that's not.
I think you're right.
And then Passover is to counter the one son, and then Shavuos counters one, and then Sukkot.
That I didn't know.
Sukkot counters the other.
That I didn't know.
And I got that connection. And then when I see the word evil, the word lie is in that. So I don't know, emes, and then Taras emes, and I jotted down a couple of things. Time was getting there. And the 70 nations, is that not supposed to correspond to the 70 names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu?
Wow, 70 letters maybe in his name. How about the 70 nations? How about the 70 descendants of Yaakov that went to Mitzrayim?
But the
70 and 70.
And that Ishmael is that not supposed to take the place of the 3, the Islamic, the Muslim, and the Arabic, who all are non-physical idol worshippers. That was the first to show a non-physical entity, that they didn't have a physical idol per se, such as the sun or some kind of conjured figurine or something like this.
Let me say this. If you look at who our enemies have been. So, you mentioned Mitzrayim is a descendant of Ham. Ham seems to have been the most cursed of Noach's sons. The next one was Bavel, also a descendant of Ham, I believe. So here our first adversaries were from the lowest. Then Paras and Madai, I believe, came from Yafes, as did Yavan, Greece. So our second set of adversaries are from the middle son, who is better than Ham, but not as good as Shem. Then who are our last adversaries? Rome, who comes from Shem. Ishmael, who comes from Shem. So in other words, what seems to be happening is that on this road to regaining that original status of excellence, spiritual excellence, we are having to fight and emerge victorious over first the lowest levels, and then we graduate to middle school, and we're now battling the forces of Yafet and emerging, and then the last era of the exile, we are battling the forces of Shem. And it seems like when we get there, then we will be back
That's very
on top.
nice. In other words, we're fighting within ourselves, the last,
the levels of evil, and we're each going higher and higher. Yeah. Shkoach. Okay, let's call it a class, and then we can discuss further.
Thank you for listening to Torah Media Atlanta. Won't you consider making a donation to help support this important work? Just go to TorahMediaAtlanta.com and click on the donate link. Thank you very much.